Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. Genesis chapter 49 and 50, last two chapters of Genesis. They set up quite a lot. So, without any further ado, let's get into Genesis chapter 49. And Jacob called his sons and said, "Come together, that I might tell you what is to befall you in days to come. Assemble and hearken, O sons of Jacob. Hearken to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and first fruit of my vigor, exceeding in rank and exceeding in honor. Unstable as water, you shall excel no longer. For when you mounted your father's bed, you brought disgrace. My couch he mounted. Simeon and Levi are a pair. Their weapons are tools of lawlessness. Let not my person be included in their council. Let not my being be counted in their assembly. For when angry, they slay men. When pleased, they maim oxen. Cursed be their anger so fierce, and their wrath so relentless. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. You, O Judah, your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the nape of your foes. Your father's sons shall bow low to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. On prey, my son, have you grown. He couches, lies down like a lion, like the king of beasts who dare rouse him. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, so that tribute shall come to him, and the homage of people be his. He tethers his ass to a vine, his ass with his foal to a choice vine. He washes his garment in wine, his robe in blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, his teeth are whiter than milk. Zebulun shall dwell by the seashore. He shall be a haven for ships, and his fleet shall rest on Sidon. Issachar is a strong-boned ass, crouching among the sheepfolds. When he saw how good was security and how pleasant the country, he bent his shoulder to the burden and became a toiling serf. Dan shall govern his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the road, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels, so that his rider is thrown backwards. I wait for your deliverance, O Lord. Gad shall be raided by raiders, but he shall raid at their heels. Asher's bread shall be rich, that he may yield royal dainties. Naphtali is a hind let loose, which yields lovely fawns. Joseph is a wild ass by a spring, wild colts on a hillside. Archers bitterly assailed him. They shot at him and harried him, yet his bow stayed taut, and his arms were made firm by the might of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob. There the shepherd, the rock of Israel, the God of your father who helps you, and Shaddai who blesses you with blessings of heaven above. Blessed be the deep that couches below, blessings of the breast and womb. The blessings of your father surpass the blessings of my ancestors, to the utmost bounds of the eternal hills. May they rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the elect of his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he consumes the foe, and in the evening he divides the spoil. All these were the tribes of Israel, 12 in number, and this is what their father said to them as he bade them farewell, addressing to each of the parting word to them. Then he instructed them, saying to them, I am about to be gathered to my kin. Bury me with my fathers in the cave which is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave which is in the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre in the land of Canaan, the field that Abraham brought from Ephron at the Hittite for a burial site. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried, there Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried, and there I buried Leah, the field and the cave in it, bought from the Hittites. When Jacob finished his instructions to his son, he threw his feet into the bed, and breathing his last, he was gathered to his people. This is kind of a summary of things that have gone on. Reuben is the firstborn, and for that he's still praised by Jacob, or Israel, as he calls himself here. But that little incident about sleeping with his father's concubine is not forgotten. Simeon and Levi, it says that they'll be cursed among men, their anger is so fierce, yet Levi actually goes on to become blessed and running the temples. So that's a bit of an odd one. And they are scattered in Israel. They don't have a territory of their own because Levi is supposed to be looking after the temple. Judah, of course, mighty Judah, the tribe that survives to the present day, along with Levi. He's given all sorts of praise about how he'll have wine, and it keeps going over what he'll wash his clothes in wine. His eyes are like wine. There's an interesting idea that the idea to see blues as a modern phenomenon. When Homer is describing the Odyssey and even the Iliad, he talks about the wine-colored oceans. And it's believed that for some reason the pigmentate or the cones and rods in the eyes to perceive blue didn't really develop until pretty recently, like 3,000-4,000 years ago. So we run across this idea of wine. Now, we know nobody's eyes today are colored the same as wine. Remember, they're talking about red wine in this time period. White wine is a much later development. And we know his eyes wouldn't have been red, but judging from Homer, they could have been blue. Just because we can't see an eye color doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The infrared and ultraviolet spectrums prove that. So perhaps that's what Jacob is referring to here. Maybe Judah had blue eyes. Or at least a very pretty color, green, hazel, whatever you want to get into. Dan shall govern his people. This shows us that these people are not writing at the time. We know most of these books were physically written down during the exile in Babylon. But the first king, King Saul, is chosen from the tribe of Dan. And while the Judahites eventually gain the kingship because Dan is a viper by the path and bites the horse's heels so that the horse throws his rider backward, is kind of exactly what happens. So we see this is being written in much the same way that Virgil wrote the Aeneid. He was writing at a later time and trying to fit events together, put prophecies in, and that's what this is. It's prophecies of what will happen, but they've already happened, so it's easy to include them. It's a great, great literary device. You can't blame them for using it because this was common practice. But with that, we get news that Leah has passed away. Yeah, there's a big fuss about Rachel and dying her, but while all this other stuff was happening, Leah died. Hope you didn't miss it. Oops, we did. She's back there buried in the cave. So bury me with her. It's a very kind of weird way to wrap up a plot thread. Different literary standards, though. Let's go to chapter 50. Now, this is the last chapter of Genesis. So they got to wrap it up and set up for Exodus. Oh, by the way, it's really strange. Joseph gives his father's blessings, jumps into bed, feet first, and promptly leaves the stage. Literally kicks his heels up. Chapter 50. Joseph flung himself upon his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph ordered the physicians in his service to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel. It required 40 days, for such is the full period of embalming. The Egyptians bewailed him 70 days, and when the wailing period was over, Joseph spoke to Pharaoh's court, saying, "Do me this favor, and lay the appeal before Pharaoh. My father made me swear, saying, I am about to die. Be sure to bury me in the grave which I make ready for myself in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, let me go up and bury my father, then I shall return." And the Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father, as he made you promise on oath." So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all the officials of Pharaoh, the senior members of his court, and all of Egypt's dignitaries, together with all of Joseph's household, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the region of Goshen. Chariots, too, and horsemen went up with him. It was a very large troop. Then they came to Goren Ha'atad, which is beyond the Jordan. They held here a very great and solemn lamentation, and he observed a mourning period of 7 days for his father. And when the Canaanite inhabitants of the land saw the mourning at Goren Ha'atad, they said, "This is a solemn mourning on the part of the Egyptians." That is why it was named Abdel Mizraim, which is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he instructed them. His sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, the field near Mamre, which Abraham had brought for a burial site from Ephron the Hittite. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and all of his brothers, and all who had gone with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrong we did him?" So they sent this message to Joseph. "Before his death, your father left this instruction. So shall you say to Joseph, 'Forgive, I urge you, the offense and guilt of your brothers who treated you so harshly. Therefore, please forgive the offense of the servants of the God of your father.'" And Joseph was in tears as they spoke to him. His brothers went to him themselves, flung themselves before him, and said, "We are prepared to be your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Have no fear. Am I a substitute for God? Besides, although you intended me harm, God intended it for good, so as to bring about the present result, the survival of many people. So fear not, I will sustain you and your children." And thus he reassured them, speaking kindly to them. So Joseph and his father's household remained in Egypt. Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph lived to see children of the third generation of Ephraim. The children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were likewise born upon Joseph's needs. At length, Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die. God will surely take notice of you and bring you up from this land that he promised on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." So Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, "When God has taken notice of you, you shall carry up my bones from here." Joseph died at the age of 110 years, and he was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. We get a very interesting parallel here. Now, there's multiple authors working on all of these books, but we get Joseph being embalmed in a process that takes 40 days. And in Exodus, we're going to see that the children of Israel wander in the wilderness for 40 years, where they are embalmed before they can get to the promised land. That's a little hint of what's coming, but Exodus, I'm pretty sure everybody knows the basic story of it. We get this long diatribe once again about the field of Machpelah that was bought by Abraham from Ephron the Hittite. Again, they're really emphasizing their ownership of that land and making sure that everybody remembers that belongs to us. We signed the contract, we handed the money, and it was all fair and square. You asked a fair price, we paid a fair price. Just because that's how business transactions are recorded, and that's how things are emphasized in myth. Joseph goes at 110 years, which is pretty remarkable. There's obviously some ages that are fudged upwards, but not everybody died at the age of 20 and 30 in the past. There were people who lived a long time. There's also the fact that back then most people used a lunar calendar because it's a lot easier to follow the movements of the moon than it is the sun. The Egyptians, the Sumerians were all fantastic with making calendars, and they mostly had a solar calendar, but the regular people would use a lunar calendar because it would let them know when to plant crops and when to do all sorts of important events. So 110 years now comes within what we might do with a lunar calendar. Even though the people knew there were 13 months to a full year. There were what were called sacred years, and they might have counted 12 lunar months instead of 13. The Mayans did this. A lot of people had ideas for different cycles. So it's important to remember 110 years now becomes possible. He would have been about mid-80s if you go by my idea. Not 100% positive on it, but again, it's an idea that exists in most of the world. So it's plausible. Not impossible, but plausible. With that, we bring the chapter of Genesis to a close. We hope you enjoyed the book of Genesis and our show. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, buy the merchandise, specifically the books listed down in the comments. For less than a cup of coffee a day, you can have the ebook, or less than a cup of coffee a day for 6 days, you can have, well, actually, coffee's expensive these days, probably even less than that. But you can have one of the hardback editions, and believe me, every penny that comes to this show helps. But most importantly, we hope you have a fantastic day.